community, welcome back. Today we're going to be making an egg bake. I personally love egg bakes because you can eat them for breakfast. If you have leftovers, you can take them to lunch. Or who doesn't love a good breakfast for dinner recipe? So in other words, it's a pretty versatile meal that you can have no matter what meal of the day you're having. It's very nutrient dense and it's also really cost effective. In total, the recipe probably didn't cost more than $5 for everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and take you through our ingredients. Obviously the main attraction of this recipe are our eggs. I'm using 4 eggs. I personally am someone that likes to have 2 eggs per serving or at a time. So when I make this, I always have enough egg bake to eat for one meal and then I have leftovers. So I tend to make egg bakes for dinner, honestly. And so I'll have half of it at dinner and then half of it for lunch the next day or breakfast. I then have some spinach. I had gone ahead and bought a really large packet of spinach, and knowing that I wouldn't be able to eat it all in one sitting, I froze half of it. So we're gonna use from our frozen reserves here. This was fresh, but if you buy frozen spinach, that works too. Then I'll be using mushrooms. So I have a few left in here, and then I'll dip into this bag as needed. I'm going to be using cheese today. It's going to be blue cheese crumbled. You can use any type of cheese you'd like. I just had blue cheese, and so that's what I'm using. I'm going to put a little bit of ground pepper on it. So here's my peppercorn in my grinder. And then olive oil to coat our pan. And so we're going to be mixing it in a bowl, and then I just have my fork that I tend to mix it all together with. This is a Pyrex dish. It's oven safe. You want to make sure that whatever you use to actually bake it in, it is oven safe. You do not want to put a dish in there that is not oven safe. It could crack and you'd have a lot of broken glass, and it's just really dangerous. And then I have my measuring cup. So I have a 1/4 cup for our cheese, and then a cup, so I'll put in a cup of spinach. I'll probably actually put in more than a cup of spinach, but I want to show you what one serving would constitute, and then around a cup of mushrooms. Before you begin handling food, whether you're cooking it or eating it, you want to make sure that you wash your hands. So go ahead and wash your hands for a minimum of 20 seconds. That's what the CDC recommends. Or you can go ahead and sing the ABC song or happy birthday song, or just use a regular old timer. When you are washing your hands, you want to make sure that you're using warm soapy water, nothing too hot. You don't want to burn your hands, but you also don't want to just use cold water. So warm soapy water, and make sure that you get around your wrists, in between your fingers, and underneath your fingernails. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands. Right. We're at my sink, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my sink on, and I have it to warm water. And so I'm just going to get them a little wet, and then get my soap. My soap that I'm using today is Method. It's the pink grapefruit. And so I'm just going to go ahead, get around those wrists, in between my fingers, under my fingernails. I'm using the timer on my phone, on the camera. And then after 20 seconds, you're just gonna go ahead and rinse it all off. All right, so you're gonna go ahead and turn your water off. I always use my elbow to turn off the water, whether I'm in my house or especially in a public restroom if the sink is not automatic. Because there's nothing worse than washing your hands and then all of a sudden you go ahead and you have to touch the knob of the faucet, and so you're probably just getting more bacteria back on your hands to begin with. If you can't use your elbow, it's always best to grab a paper towel or something. So a lot of times in public restrooms or public bathrooms, I will just go ahead and actually get a paper towel ready to go so you can wave to it and then pull it out and use that to shut off your sink. All right, so I went ahead and dried my hands. I'm gonna go ahead and take you to preheat our oven. So you're gonna wanna preheat your oven to 350 degrees. We just hit bake, start, And then you'll hear the beep when it's ready. I'm gonna go ahead and just start cracking my eggs. And so I crack them up against the side of the bowl, and then you just crack it open and the yolk comes out, or the whole egg comes out. All right, so when you are cracking your egg, here, I'll show you the crack. So I'm just gonna lightly bang it. You kind of hear it when the yolk, or when the eggshell cracks. And then just get it apart, it falls in. One thing to note, if you do end up with eggshells in your egg mixture, you can actually use the back of the eggshell, and it kind of acts as a magnet, so it attracts the piece that landed in there, and you can scoop it up pretty easily. Because I just touched raw egg, I finished cracking them. I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands before I touch anything else. I know a lot of people might say that I just washed my hands, which I did, but it's important to wash your hands after touching raw fish, meat, eggs, just because you can end up spreading foodborne bacteria or illnesses, and so I don't want salmonella. Obviously the eggs are gonna get baked, but things like my spinach, I'm not gonna use all of the spinach right now. I will put it away and then use some later in smoothies. I would hate to cross-contaminate. Same goes with the mushrooms. I might put the mushrooms in another dish, which wouldn't get baked to as high a temperature or even for as long. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands again. We have our eggs right here in the bowl, and I'm just gonna go ahead and start whisking them together. You can use a whisk. I don't have that many, so I just kind of beat them together with a fork. And you can see the yolk does begin to break apart. Eggs are actually really nutritious for you, so they're not an expensive source of protein, but one egg does have about 6 grams of protein in it, so they make a great post-workout snack. They help add this meal overall is really nutrient dense because you get your protein source from your eggs, you get your dairy from the cheese, you get, if you have it with a slice of toast or bread, especially if you made my homemade whole wheat bread recipe from the last video that was posted, you can get your grains from that. And then obviously we have spinach and mushrooms, so great source of vegetables. And then I also like to sometimes have a piece of banana, or I guess not a piece, a whole banana or like an apple with it. So you can see we've mixed together or whisked together the eggs. They're pretty well beaten. And now I'm gonna go ahead and add in my spinach. So I normally just tend to kind of use one large handful, but today to show you guys, I will measure it out. So I tend to like to pack it down really well in my cup, and then I would normally put in like 1 to 2 large handfuls. I feel like a little extra veggie really didn't hurt anybody, so that would be great. All right, so we have our cup of spinach. I'm gonna add a little bit more. All right. There's 1 solid cup of spinach. You know, like Popeye, he would have his can of spinach and then his muscles would grow. So we're gonna go ahead and place that in our bowl with the eggs. And then I just kind of like to take the fork and push it down so that it ends up being coated. Some people, I call this an egg bake. Some people call it a crustless quiche. So if you really have it, just the egg bake, and you don't have the bread that I made, or you have gluten-free bread, it's actually a gluten-free dish. All right, so my spinach is pretty well covered with egg. And I'm gonna go ahead, reseal this, and then I'll put it back in my freezer to save for later. All right, so now we're gonna work on our mushrooms. This was just frozen mushrooms. They were mixed, so there's a variety of mushrooms in here. There's shiitake mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, shimeji mushrooms, which I've never heard of those before, but they taste great. And then there's just your regular button mushrooms in here too. All right. So we're a little short, we're not quite at a full cup, which means that I will open up my other packet. Okay, so spinach obviously is a dark green leafy vegetable. Dark green leafy vegetables are known for a myriad of health benefits. One of the ones that I like to point out is they're a great source of iron in addition to being an excellent source of fiber. And then mushrooms. So mushrooms are actually a fungus, which I know some people, they're hit or miss. They either like mushrooms or they can't stand them. And they do have an interesting texture. So for some people where texture is I guess is a selling point, or it can make or break the meal, they might not enjoy the texture of mushrooms. But mushrooms are also known for gut health. Some researchers are actually doing studies to show that mushrooms might have cancer-fighting properties to them. You can always go ahead and buy fresh mushrooms. When you do buy those, because they are a fungus that grows in the ground, please make sure that you wash them well so that way you get any dirt off. The dirt, you just really don't want to be eating dirt, so you can put them in a colander and rinse them off and then go ahead and slice them yourself. But if you're making this dish to be your fast food meal of the week, you're obviously probably not going to want to take time to actually wash the mushrooms and then cut them. So you can go ahead and buy frozen mushrooms that everything's already been done for you. You just have to measure it out and dump it into your bowl. All right, so as you can see, this is a pretty loaded omelet. I'm gonna go ahead soon here. I just want to kind of coat it as well as best as I can. I'm gonna go ahead and begin to grease, and by grease it's gonna be me placing olive oil in the Pyrex dish, and then we'll dump this in there and sprinkle the cheese on top before throwing it in the oven. All right, so I have my Pyrex dish, and if you remember, I told you to make sure that you read to ensure that whatever dish you're using is oven safe. Normally it will say it on the bottom of the dish or sometimes on the Tupperware lid, but Pyrex, Anchor, Le Creuset, those are all known for being oven safe dishes. So I just poured about a teaspoon of olive oil into the bottom of my Pyrex dish, and I'm gonna swirl it around to really coat the Pyrex. And then you can even, if you feel like you're not getting everything covered as well as you would like, you can just take your hand in and kind of paint it, or you could use a cooking brush, like a pastry brush, to help get it. I'm just gonna use my hands, and then I'll wash them as soon as I pour the egg bake in here. But it's quicker and it's one less utensil for me to wash, which is something that right now I'm aiming for. All right, so it's well greased. The reason you do this is you just don't want it to stick to your pan. All right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take this and place it in here. And then you can just take your fork and kind of rearrange everything a little bit. It might have slid out a little differently than what you expected, but all right. So once again, I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands, then I'll come back to complete this. All right, so I'm back. We're gonna add about a 1/4 cup of blue cheese. Some people will take their cheese, especially if they have shredded cheese, and kind of mix it in with their egg bake. I always like to put my cheese on top. So I'm gonna go ahead and just measure out a 1/4 of a cup. This doesn't have to be an exact science, but I don't wanna go overboard on the cheese, because while cheese is good, too much of a good thing can be bad. So you don't wanna use a whole lot. All right, so here is our egg bake, and I'm just gonna go ahead. Didn't do such a good job of distributing it, but. And then, all right, I'm just gonna spread the cheese out over the top of my egg bake. So this is what it looks like prior to going into the oven. I'm gonna go ahead and place it in there. If you have a meat thermometer, make sure that after cooking it for about 30 minutes, when you place the meat thermometer in, it reads an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a meat thermometer, a way to test it will be to take a knife and stick it all the way in and then pull it out. And if it's clean, then you know that it's done. If you've cooked the cheese and mixed it in the egg bake, then you might want to actually poke it a few times just because the cheese might get a little sticky because that melts. But for us, where the cheese is on top and it's blue cheese, you can tell pretty easily whether it's the egg bake being runny or whether it's cheese. So our oven already went ahead and preheated. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open it and place in the egg. There it goes. I'll see you in 30 minutes. We're back. Okay, so our 30 minutes are up. I'm gonna go ahead and take the egg bake out of the oven, check it out. I'll stick a butter knife in it to see if it comes out clean. Remember, for those of you that have a meat thermometer at home, it should read an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So quick oven safety before you go ahead and touch anything hot, whether it be a hot pot that's on top of the oven or a pan that you've put in the oven. Make sure that you use oven mitts or pot holders. I like this one because it has a little bit of rubber here to help me get a really good grip on it. But you never want to touch anything with your bare hands because you could end up getting burnt and seriously injured. I'm gonna open our oven. Oh, look at it in there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take a kitchen tip or fun fact. When you take something hot out of the oven, you really don't want to just place it on your counter. It could end up damaging the counter. So I have one of these rubber mats. You can use it to put in your drawers to kind of as a mat to help keep everything in place. I had a little excess, and so I've come to find that just putting this down and then putting the hot pan or dish on top of it, it helps act as a barrier between the counter and the hot dish, so it'll protect the counter and it won't destroy it, or the hot pan won't destroy it. This rubber mat, you could go ahead and use your pot holder, oven mitt, and put that down as the barrier between the counter and the hot pan. Or if you have a trivet, which is the actual thing that's supposed to be used, trivets are honestly, they tend to be like a piece of stone with little pegs at the bottom. Some have 3, some have 4, and they just you serve dishes on them, and that's what they do. They keep your counter, your table from being burnt by something hot. So we're gonna go ahead and stick a butter knife in. Stick it in. This is gonna be a little liquidy compared to other egg bakes just because we have spinach. So I have my cheese on here, but it's really actually clean. That's just cheese. The spinach and mushrooms are both going to emit some liquid, but the knife is clean. All that you see is actual blue cheese. Okay, so now that our egg bake is done, I'm gonna go ahead and add the peppercorn. You could grind it in the eggs before you go ahead and cook them, or you could just sprinkle it on top. So I'm just going to twist a little bit on top. And you can add more on your own plate, so you can season it to taste as you want. If you like a lot, go for it. If you notice, I didn't actually put any salt in here, and that's just due to the fact that I feel like we get enough sodium from the cheese. But if you want to add a little bit more salt, feel free to add that to taste too. I would let the egg bake sit for about 10 minutes just to let it cool off. Like a souffle, you might notice that the egg bake does settle a little bit after taking it out of the oven. That's completely natural, it's normal, don't worry about it. So as I mentioned, I made enough to serve 2. If you're someone that only likes to eat 1 egg at a time, this would actually serve 4 people, or you could use it for 4 different meals. I'll probably eat this tonight for dinner and for breakfast tomorrow. Again, it's a really nutrient dense, cheap, fast, and healthy meal. It took us no time to make. It's really inexpensive, and it's a healthy version of fast food. So next time you don't know what to make for dinner, just go get your eggs and find whatever vegetables you have in your fridge, in your freezer, and add them in, and you can make the egg bake all on your own. So next time when you make your egg bake, be sure to tag us at UND Wellness to show us a picture of what you put in yours. Hope you had fun. I'll see you next time. Enjoy your egg bake. Bye.